Good morning. Oh, look,
Hey, Joshua. Welcome to the show.
Oh,
He slips
God.
in right under the wire.
That's how I roll, guys.
How you doing, man? Good to meet you.
I'm good. Good to meet you as well. How's it going, fellas?
Very well. Well, for our listeners, I'd like to introduce Joshua Kopel, who is a restaurateur in Los Angeles. We were going to talk a little bit today about what is the role of the restaurateur. We think about chefs all the time, and we think of restaurants in terms of, a great chef opens a restaurant. But more often, that's not the case. More often, it's somebody else who has the idea for the restaurant, opens the restaurant, and hires a chef to come in and do the cooking. You really came up through the ranks in the restaurant business, I understand. Started as a busser, didn't you?
Oh, I did. It was the great American dream, right? Like I was 14 years old, mopping up piss in somebody else's bar to one day mop up piss in my own bar.
That's awesome.
No,
I can't ask for better than that.
What you were saying is one day I'm going to regret that someday.
Now I own the mop, I own the bar, I own it all. So it's truly that rags to riches American dream story. I'm incredibly fortunate to be in the position I'm in.
Except now I don't know how good it is to own a restaurant today, but
it's an absolute nightmare. But it's not a desk job.
The dream has become a weird stuff. That dream that you worked for so many years, now it's become a weird, very reality that you're like, okay, so I spent 20 years or 50, or I don't know how long you spent. And then you're like, okay, now what do I do?
It was shocking, truly.
Olive once said that he began in the restaurant business. He started at the top and worked his way all the way to the bottom as owner.
That's true.
That is a very accurate way to look at the situation.
Now, are any of your restaurant operations, do you just have one restaurant now and it's currently closed?
It is. Absolutely. So we had 3 last year, and then I sold the bar. I sold the fast casual concept fourth quarter of last year. Fortunately, I mean, it had more to do with me directing my attention where I wanted it to go, which was the fine dining concept. The more restaurants you open, the more jobs you have. And,
Sure.
And that realization really prompted that. Yes, chef.
No, Josh, we didn't prepare anything because we wanted to it's kind of a loose conversation, right?
Yeah, for sure.
But I love your path, and James was stunning because we thought we lost you, so we had this plan of like when the guest doesn't show up, right? But
Joshua, I never doubted you for a minute. I
love you for it, James. Thank you.
But basically, I want you to talk about the path that it takes. And a lot of people, they go into business, they either go to culinary school or they just go right onto the market. And then at the end, you are doing a podcast also, which kind of saving your life right now, right?
Yeah.
Do you want to tell us a little bit about your path and how you got there, and what you're doing is really awesome.
Thank you, man. I'm a professional servant. That's what I do for a living. It's what I've always done. I can remember as far back, I've never told this story before, but I can remember I was a senior in high school, and you take those high school aptitude tests that tell you where you belong in the mix of things. And it told me that I would do well in the food service industry. And I turned to my buddy, and I was like, hey man, I think I'm going to work at McDonald's for the rest of my life. And he chuckled and I chuckled. But it wasn't until I got my first job in the industry that it truly resonated with me. Like I got it. It just made sense. And it wasn't one of those things where I liked the feeling of power or authority that came from, bussing a table or mopping a floor. I liked serving people. That was really the aha moment for me. It was like, I just like taking care of people.
Exactly.
And then like once you can't unring a bell, right? So
Right.
as soon as that happened, my path was set. I graduated from college in, I think, 2000 in marketing, before the internet, before social media. So
wow, that's
that
funny.
was right. So that was all but worthless. But my path was set. I already knew. And I moved to Los Angeles, and I had this big idea. And though I didn't have like a lot of money in my pocket, I was like, I'm going to come to Los Angeles. I'm going to find like an amazing concept, and I'll bring it back to Louisiana. And so I moved out to Los Angeles with the commitment. I told my grandmother I'll be there 6 months and I'll come back.
Famous last words.
Right? 6 months pass, a year passes. And I just didn't find anything that resonated. But the more time I spent there, the more I realized, and if you remember Los Angeles back in the early 2000s, it wasn't the restaurant mecca it is today. And, you know, even when the cuisine got better, the hospitality didn't. And I saw that there was this huge hole in the market for authentic Southern hospitality, regardless of the cuisine. Right. And I wanted to serve people. So I managed to get in by way of nightlife, was running nightclubs in Hollywood for several years. And then eventually, what club?
Yeah.
It was called Element. And this was like early 2003, 2004, 2005.
Because I came to LA in 1980s.
Oh.
I was in the 80s, and I work at La Toc, one of the first Nouvelle Cuisine restaurants in the US.
Mm-hmm.
And people were very confused about ordering the entree without the soup and salad. They didn't get it. So there was a salad, you know, that was like super expensive, right? And they were like, "But what is that? What is that?" And, well, it's a salad, and then you have the meal. But that comes with bread. No. It's that dish. It was very difficult, man. And
I can imagine.
In a restaurant other than La Toc, everywhere you go, there is two wines. There's Merlot and Chardonnay. That is it in the whole shop.
Right.
It's Chardonnay and Merlot.
Because people can pronounce them.
Right. But isn't it amazing though that in 2 decades the game has completely changed?
Yes.
And people look to Los Angeles now and say, you know, what are they doing culinarily? How is that at the forefront? It's shocking. You know, and
US in general. US has improved. US, I mean, look at the beer making, look at the cheese making, look at all these awesome artisans that never existed before. This is new. And they are as good, or some of them are even better than European counterparts. So we're looking at a revolution here. This is good.
It's amazing. And I think you're going to see more innovation coming out of younger chefs. Sure. I do see that what's happening within the industry now is absolutely devastating. As a restaurateur, not as a chef, I can tell you from personal experience that there are foundational issues within this industry that need to be tackled. And this is the opportunity to do that. And I think what it's going to lead to is opportunities culinarily for young chefs to do amazing things in innovative spaces. The people are really going to begin to think outside the box. That's the opportunity here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Are you as excited about customer service as I come from a retail background, but also restaurants. And I've been bartending for a long time and serving, and customer service has always been a big thing with me. And it's interesting what you said about knowing this is what you do and this is who you are, because I think for a lot of people go into restaurants as, okay, I'm going to do this until I sell my novel or until I get my next Broadway show. But in Europe, there's always been a tradition of professional waiters where this was their profession and they made a living at it, and it was honorable and it was a necessary part of society, really. I mean, so that's very interesting that you say that, because I've always kind of looked at it that way too, is that it doesn't have to be a stepping stone. It can be the destination itself, I think. It's an honorable profession.
James, every industry is in the hospitality industry.
Right.
The only question is whether they realize it or not. So we specialize in food and beverage, but everybody's in the hospitality industry. That realization for me made me a better manager. It made me a better leader for my team. And I was then able to turn around and lead them in the way they needed to be led. Los Angeles is a very unique place in the way that everyone that works for you in the front of house is one decent audition away from telling you to go screw yourself. Right?
And you don't.
That's it. And they don't. And the reason
that's
they
when
don't.
You swallow that, and it. Okay. So now, what's going on with the restaurant? I mean, we have the same things here. We have a lot of friends in the restaurant. I mean, San Francisco Bay Area, we know everybody. Lots of people are very worried, and some people have left the key in the mailbox and just literally left because they can't pay the rent. They can't sell their equipment. They can't do anything. They have no power. They just leave. So this is terrible, right? Right?
Yeah. I mean, I'm in a holding pattern myself. I know that a lot of people are opening to try different things. I'm more strategic, and not that that's a better choice, but for me, the decision was once I see a profitable business model, once I see someone out there that's not just busy, but they're profitable, I'll do that. But I'll be honest with you guys, I'm not going back to working for free or paying to work for free, which is, my life has vacillated typically between those two, regardless of my level of success as a restaurateur. Just because the restaurant makes a lot of money doesn't mean it makes a lot of money, right? And that was in a beautiful economy, right? That was in a full economy. We're in the middle of a global pandemic with a very uncertain future. So I'm not about to take all the money that I have left in the bank and experiment, or pay my rent for that matter.
Jeff, that's great. Have money in the bank. Some people have no more money. That's this is what's happening. It's literally right now. There's a lot of meeting about what to do in the food in the future. The future is you can talk all day long about the future, but you don't make it come. It's like the astrologer. They can predict the future, but they don't make it come. What I'm saying here is there is no answer from the government, and the fear that is being distilled is inside the business. We cannot do anything until that fear is gone. So there's no responses we can do. Like Josh, like you're saying, you can try something, you can try to innovate, but it's without any knowledge. There's no reference. We don't have any past reference to move forward. So we're really shooting in the dark, right?
Well, there's only one. Go ahead, James, please.
Well, I just wanted to say that I want to talk about flow because I'm fascinated with that. We'll get into that in a minute. But you said something very interesting on your website.
Who's Flo? Who's that?
Flo, a good friend of mine.
I want to talk about Flo.
On your website, there is a little video where you're talking about the current situation, and you say something very interesting that really struck me, and that is that maybe this is a good time for us all, since the industry is effectively shut down. Maybe this is the time for us all to step back and rethink the industry. Can you expand on that? I mean, what do you see a positive thing coming out of all of this, if there could possibly be one?
Oh, there definitely is. It starts with everyone agreeing that the pandemic didn't obliterate the restaurant industry. That the restaurant industry was on weak footing to begin with. We didn't do a great job as operators in making sure that we had enough money in the bank. There's an optimism that all entrepreneurs and all restaurateurs possess. And what that does is that blinds you to the realities of the situation. I can tell you personally, I was shocked to discover when the pandemic hit that I had a month's worth of cash in the bank. And that meant I'm rich, right? Compared to so many other people out there that their run rate is 5 days, 6 days, 7 days. We need, as an industry, to take a moment and say, hey, what are we going to do about pricing? What are we going to do about gratuity? What are we going to do about labor? This has been, and you guys have been at this longer than me, but this is the first time in 20 years that I have seen open honest and transparent dialogue about what's going on in the industry.
Wow.
And that's not just amongst restaurateurs, but amongst restaurateurs and patrons, because they need to be part of the conversation as well.
Sure. You know,
So
we've been doing kind of a takeout business at César, which is next door to where Olive is right now. Right next between Chez Panisse and Kitchen on Fire is César, and I'm only there a couple days a week, but we get a lot of our regulars have come in to pick up food, and they're all saying the same thing. They're all telling us how important César is to them. That it's not just, we miss, because there's lots of places to go to eat, but César for many of them, and I know it's not unique to us, there are other places that have this, but for them it's a place that they go, it's their socializing, it's their meeting place, it's what restaurants have always been or have aspired to be. And it makes me realize, it is really, they really are part of the conversation. Our clients are very close to us, and they should be involved.
Well, James, will they pay 30% more so that you can provide subsidized health care and retirement plans to your people?
I think some of them would.
You're right. Well, and everybody needs to adjust. Like, how is it possible? Like, we're old dogs, right? How is it humanly possible that we exist in an industry where you can work for 40 years and not have a retirement plan?
Right.
That you don't have health insurance, that those aren't givens. And it's not because of the patrons. It's because of us. It's because we haven't been willing to have that conversation with them and say, listen, you're going to pay not $65, you're going to pay $85 for that steak. And this is why. This is where that's money going. And then you give people the opportunity. The reason we don't is I really do think, and I can only speak for myself and the people that I know directly, but there is so much fear wrapped around closing that we don't advocate for ourselves, that we don't make the right decisions for us.
Right, exactly.
That's why I'm open 7 days a week instead of 5 days a week. That's why I opened for lunch service when I still hadn't fully built out dinner service. That's why we offer happy hour for 2 hours a day, then 3, then 4, then 5, then 6. It's just like none of that makes sense. Like, can't we just agree that, like, this is what I'm serving, this is the price, this is when I'm going to serve it? Neither we stay in business or we go out of business. But like, because like the compromise is that you end up running a business that isn't profitable longer, right?
Right. Because you have to.
Josh, do you know that the place we opened, César, it's right next to Chez Panisse, right here. It's been voted the top 100 restaurant in the East Bay for 8 years in a row until I left. It has nothing to do with it. But James and I worked there together. It was so in this restaurant, that was funny because when we opened, we would have so that place is very small. It's a small place of 50 seats, 49 seats. We would go about 400 people a day. There was a line at the door nonstop until 12:30, 12:45. We take a food order in the street when they closed. It was insane. They were so famous because of that noise. When we started that, we had this place where people could just sit down anywhere. We packed the table. It was tapas, so the food was nonstop. It was very new concept of like, the little things on the side, but it was ended up being a lot of money at the end, and people were freaking out. But it was a very busy concept, and the social aspect is the number one aspect of that restaurant. And the way it works is, basically what happened is we were literally putting tables together. I think at some point you can put 2 tables together and have 13 people around. That means, people were happy because they were all together. There's a huge, and I said that on a previous postcard, but there's one of the largest study ever made by Harvard of 75 years on happiness. It came out a few years ago. It's one of the biggest study ever made, and Harvard conducted it. So it's really interesting to see those big names. And they conducted the study and determined that one of the most important elements out of all the happiness factors is connectivity. And where do we get connectivity? Exclusively in bars and restaurants. And when does it happen? It happens when the days goes out. And when you look at suicide rate, it's that time. It's where the night comes. And as human, we have a very hard time with darkness. And the bar and the restaurant is a social integrity of the society. You cannot remove bars and restaurants. You cannot remove them.
Mm-hmm. No, I can agree with you more. I also think that to dig a little deeper into that, I think the bigger concern are independent restaurants, right? Because that's who's really informing the culture of the community. It's not, and I'm not talking poorly of the Chili's and the Applebee's of the world.
Oh yeah,
I've celebrated many a birthday there myself.
Let me cut you. Yes, you can talk shit about these people, please. I am not. Don't. No. It's only yes. We
the independent restaurant, like it's when you look at downtown LA as an example, and you say that Broken Spanish and Bon Temps and Teroni and all of these other prolific independently owned restaurants have closed, and you can say that's a tragedy for the restaurant industry, and sure that is an obvious problem, but that's a tragedy for that community as well. That is a tragedy for the cultural landscape of Los Angeles as well, and that can't be ignored as well, because independent restaurants, not only do we move the economy, but we also motivate the community.
Yeah.
I don't want to talk about Josh. I don't want to talk about. I mean, I am talking about chains and bad food. Because in my opinion, as a nutrition consultant, I work with doctors, I work with cancer people, and I can tell you, if the food was better and if people were eating a little better, we would not see all this trouble with COVID-19. This is an established fact. We got it, and people still go to McDonald's on the line. I keep driving, and so there's no end to it until we realize that our food is going to be our savior. I don't know whether. I mean, this is it. We're going to have to suffer. And Josh, people like you and I, and James also work in the restaurant, we're trapped because we're trying to tell people to eat better. We are completely subject to anything that happens, and then we just wait. Why are we have to wait? Well, there's no, it's crazy. Anyway.
Well, I say it all the time on the show because there's this great frustration, right? Like, how do we affect change? How do we do things? And I tell everyone the same thing. All you can do is whatever you can do within the four walls of your own restaurant. It's very hard to inform the industry. When we decided that we were going to go carbon neutral at the restaurant, like we knew that nobody was going to host parades for us, right? When we started, right? We knew that like that's just like you have to lead by example. When we started subsidizing healthcare, when we started looking at because like sustainability. Everybody talks about it in relation to food, but in relation to the food industry, that includes people too.
Sure.
And so we started looking at how do we better the lives of the people that are working in the restaurant as well as the people that go to the restaurant. And all you can do is lead by example. That's all you can do. So when I talk boldly about like affecting change industry wide, all I can do is talk about it and then practice it in my own restaurant,
Right. That's something that very few people really think about is that we do talk about sustainable food in terms of how the food is grown, how the animals are raised, how it gets to market and everything. But we often forget about the people involved. And of course, people are what it's all about anyway. We wouldn't be growing the food or raising the animals if we weren't trying to feed people. And it's incredible when you break it down like that we've settled for things for so long in the restaurant industry and taken it for granted because that's the way it is. But why is it that way? Why are other industries offering?
Right. But the result of that, and this is one positive aspect, is now people are looking for organic food. They're looking for really healthy food. So now all of a sudden there's this new realization that food is going to be your friend, and without that food you're going to get sick and then you might die, like some of the people. And now it's dying. We're not talking about sick anymore. This is dying we're talking about, and crippling the economy. And now we all have people around us that is suffered financially. I mean, I'm talking about financially right now, which is a terrible thing, because now people are depressed, so they're fearful, so now they're going to get more subject to sickness. So it's like, okay, this cycle is like unstoppable, because the more afraid you have stuff, the more weak you are. And then if you're weak, when your immune is completely freaked out and it's not what to do, and then you get sick. So it's like, how do we stop that machine? I mean, how do we stop that? We have no help from the government. We have a little help like a few months ago. Now all the restaurants, if they close, it's the most terrible thing that can happen in the US. I think out of any industry, and I know there's a lot of industry that are very valuable, Josh, I completely agree with that. But the restaurant is the place that is the social blender that needs to stay at any cost. Any cost. Bars and restaurants needs to stay. This is it.
Well, Chef, let's also look at the economics of the situation. The average full-service restaurant nets out at 6%, right? That means 94 cents of every dollar that a restaurant earns goes back into the American economy.
Exactly.
So, and then you're looking at $1 billion industry that employs 11 million people. So when you look at the long-term effects of the collapse of the hospitality industry, what you see is the collapse of the industry is the collapse of the American economy.
Yep.
Yeah.
And that's not overstating it. That's just
Not at all.
No,
Not at all.
it is it only 10 million people? Are you sure, Josh? I thought that was more like I thought that was more like almost 9% of the population. I think the restaurant business is the largest employer under the government. I thought that was the numbers, but
I believe that is the case.
It's big. It's big. That means that will really, really affect the economy a lot. Plus, also the scenery.
No, well, yeah, look at from an employment standpoint. You're not going to find an industry with more diversity, right? No. Whether we're talking about age, whether we're talking about gender, whether we're talking about ethnicity, you're not going to find more variables in there. Also, we employ second chance individuals, right? There are a ton of formerly incarcerated people that are in the industry.
We do.
And we actually, right. And find another industry that's doing as much as we are to bring those people into the fold, right? There are nonprofits set up that exclusively focus on taking people that are recently released from prison and giving them the skills that they need to work in our kitchens, to work in our restaurants.
To get out of the street also.
Exactly. But that's also not to say that technology doesn't have a place in the unfurling and this new rebirth of the industry. It might require fewer people to operate a restaurant moving forward. And that might not be the worst thing in the world either.
Well, there's two jobs in the world that you can go with literally with a knife or scissors anywhere in the world is hairdresser and chef. Or restaurant. You just leave, take your knife or your scissors.
That's it.
Go somewhere and do exactly the same thing again. That's pretty cool.
Well, and also the restaurant industry provides people that don't necessarily have finely honed skills. They don't necessarily have 6 years of college behind them or graduate degrees, but they can go in there and they can be successful and make a living. And with very little training, they can be up and running in no time at all. And then, of course, as they gain experience, they kind of climb the ladder as you did. But it really is a place that affords an amazing opportunity for people.
James, everywhere else in the world, people pay to go to school. When you work in a restaurant, you actually get paid to get educated.
Right.
Well, except the people that go
you
to
get fed.
School.
And in most cases, you get fed every day.
Yeah, that's true.
So, can you tell me a little bit about Flow? Is Flow your business, or is it something you're working on?
It is. Flow is something that came out of a need that I had. So I don't believe that technology needs to be divisive. I also don't think that it needs to replace labor. What it can do is it can provide a new layer of hospitality. Pro and Proper opened at 5 p.m. daily. So when I was looking at who was going to answer the phones, I was either going to pay someone to sit in an empty restaurant and do it. I was going to do it myself, or no one was going to do it. And none of those really seemed like great options to me. Mm-hmm. So in the same way I learned how to fix a toilet, I got on YouTube and I learned how to code.
First you learn how to look on YouTube. First you learn that. Then you learn the YouTube.
Then I learned how to fix a toilet, and then I learned how to code. And I created a platform whereby one reservationist could answer the phone for multiple restaurants without the guests knowing that they're talking to someone else. So they answer as the restaurant. They know all of the information that the restaurant would know, and they function as a member of their in-house team. I didn't build it to turn it into a company. I just built it for me. And then I called a few other restaurateurs I knew, and I said, hey, I built this thing. I hired this person. Why don't we share the cost of this person?
Right, that's great.
And then they told people, because that's how the industry works, right? And they told people who told people who told people. And then people started calling, and they were like, hey, I'd like to get on your service. And I'm like, well, it's not for you. It's for me. And you know, after enough no's, we brought on another person and then another person. And it's a function of need. And so it worked for me, so it worked for other people. And then what I saw that there was an opportunity to not only reduce labor, but to actually make more money. Because the person that's answering your phones today is also greeting your guests when they walk through the doors. And they're also cleaning menus and walking people to tables. And I had never thought in these terms before, but when you look at your hostess, like there is no one else that works in that restaurant that has a wider variety of responsibilities than that person. Mm-hmm. So why not take her focus or put her focus on the people in the restaurant as opposed to the people that are calling the restaurant?
Right.
And it just, you know, it made sense intuitively, and it's something that we've been able to roll out since.
Yeah, if you think about the host in a restaurant or whoever's, you know, manning they're the first person the guest encounters. Right. And typically they're the last person that they encounter. And which is all the more baffling to me why some people don't put much emphasis on it, and the people are kind of surly. And I don't know how many times I've left a restaurant where I'm looking around and there are all these people standing around and no one says, good night, thank you.
I think
how hard is that?
I think the worst is when you come to a restaurant and nobody's greeting you. I think that's even worse. Because you're like, you're not sure what to do. If you sit down, some people say, you know, you have to wait. It's, you know, there's so many different systems now, because now people are trying to remove the front of the house. So now we have a situation where you have numbers now. So you can't really sit down anymore. You can't just sit down and wait for your waiter, because it's never going to happen. So you don't know what to do. So it's not clearly indicated. There's no system. People are learning how to behave newly in the restaurant. It's all new and stuff. And one of the things we used to say in France, even though France has terrible coffee, and I used to tell people, you know, it's so weird. Like I never got the idea that everything was awesome. The wine, the coffee was disgusting. And I was telling people, you know, it's funny. So I would spend money on my coffee in Paris. In my restaurant, I would spend a little money.
They're going to revoke your citizenship for that, Olivier.
They're looking for me. And I said, the coffee flavor is the last thing that you leave with.
Right.
You leave with the coffee. That coffee stays a long time, right? It's like, and everybody drinks coffee. So you can't serve shitty coffee when the whole meal is being completely canceled. So it's the same with the host. So you see, when you say the host is the coffee, the restaurant, the problem is everything is important.
That's it, though. Everything is important, and it's
so you can't you'd love to focus, but
and so you have to staff it. You can't choose, right? You can't choose what elements you're going to focus on. You have to focus on all of them, because they're all part of the customer service experience. So when someone calls your restaurant, and I don't care whether I answer your phones or somebody else answers your phones, but like when you answer the phone, you got to give people the time that they need so that they don't feel rushed. because that's part of the customer service experience as well. So that's something that you have to take the time to work out as well, especially now. Call volume is up 82% because people are afraid.
Right.
Hey, Josh, you know what's funny? At Cesar, Cesar was really busy right away. There was no time to do anything. I mean, it was insane, literally insane. The bar is small, and we got crammed right away. And the phone was ringing nonstop. And we pick up, I think the first 3 days, we pick up the phone. And at the end, and since today, we have never picked up the phone at Cesar, ever. Because we could not offer the service. There was no way. People were asking questions. We're like, it's tapas. It's not topless.
Yeah, right.
Tapas.
Yes.
Remember that? So we never answered the phone after that, ever. And people are like, we can't. We just come.
I've always tried to equate it as you want to make people feel comfortable in the same way if somebody comes to your home. If you have somebody over for dinner or for drinks, how do you treat them? Well, you don't ignore them. You don't make them do things. You invite them in. You try to make them as comfortable as possible. You try to ascertain what they like, what they want. And it's sort of that easy, but it's also that hard. It's very difficult, which is why some people aren't very good at it, which makes me wonder why they're in the business. But so how do you do that? What's the formula? I mean, is it you set by example, right? I mean,
that's it. I mean, that's really all you can do. I think let's say within reason, right? So not in a 24-hour span, but let's say from 9 a.m. until the time your restaurant closes. Like if you are able to answer the phone, I think you should. Whether it's hiring a service, whether it's doing it yourself, I think that one thing that I learned from my own podcast, I interviewed the former chairman of Louis Vuitton, Pauline Brown, and she said that there's this halo effect. And what that means is that 50% of the enjoyment that we get from an experience is in the anticipation of that experience, and in the memory that we have of that experience.
Absolutely.
Very interesting.
So understanding that, you need to answer the phone, and you need to not only answer their questions, you need to prime them to have a good time. It has to be, have you been to the restaurant before? Oh my God, you've got to try this. People love it. Yeah. And we'll make sure you get a seat here. And it's your anniversary. We'll make sure we bring out 2 glasses of bubbles.
Nice.
And I'll send the chef to the table. Because that is hospitality. The reality is, and we all know this, they can cook this shit at their house. Period. What we are supplying, we're supplying an experience. And when you remember that, it informs every decision you make, and understanding that every element you touch is an element of hospitality.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And also, what you have to remember that the way the restaurant was conceived is it's very old. First of all, 1500 we have all the restaurants appearing. 1500, 1550, 1600. So it's very old. The principle was the owner would come out with one meal and usually a soup or stew, and that was the meal. And a la carte came much later with all the chefs that was hired by the kings and all the lords, and they were kind of let go. So now we saw all this a la carte. But the most important is for people to come and being recognized. So being recognized is you are not an anonymous person anymore. You are part of a small family, and this is where you belong. This is when you want to meet. So that's why people have their own bar. They come all the time. They may be alcoholic. That's possible, yes. But also, it's a lot of time. It's a place because they want to be there for with all the other people around. And we're going back to the same thing again. The restaurant is a social. It's a social. I don't know how to say that, but it's a social place in society. I'm repeating myself. It
is. When I built my bar in Hollywood, the idea, you have to have an intention. When you open a business, when you start on a new endeavor, you start with an intention. And my intention was to create a place that you could go by yourself.
Yeah, right.
And it's an interesting concept, right?
Yeah.
Especially for a bar because they're so social. But the idea is that the bartender was the showman. So you were going for a show. Also, the bartender was in charge of introducing you to the other people in the bar. Oh, Billy, you should meet Alice. You guys do the same thing. Or, oh, I think you two would really like to get to know each other. Mm-hmm. That way you could go every single night, and people did for 10 years. That you could go every single night, and every night is different. And every night you're hanging out with your friends. It just so happens they're new friends every night.
Right.
And so, again, to speak to your point, Chef, like it is that intention that has to go into everything we do.
Yeah. And at Cesar,
sorry.
Yeah, where everybody knows your name. And the regulars at our bar are not necessarily alcoholics. They don't come in. It's not like an old-timey bar where they come in and slam drinks for 2 hours until they can barely walk out the door. They don't. They come in and have 1 or 2 drinks. But that experience is so important to them that this same group, pretty much you can set your watch by when they show up.
Right.
And mind you, almost all of them are now retired. I mean, they've been coming in for 25 years, so they were working at one point. But now most of them are retired or they've sold their business, and yet it's still 5 o'clock. They come in, and it's the only time any of them aren't there is if they're out of town, pretty much. Right. Otherwise, and Friday night more of them come in, but still it's every night, and it's so important. And it's important to them who's working, because we all know them. We all know them by name. We know pretty much by and large what they drink. I mean, one of my
become part of their lives. You become part of their day-to-day lives. That's what you have created becomes incorporated into how they see their lives.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if there's a better reward, I don't know what it is.
The point about a social place like a bar or restaurant is socially, it is accepted for everyone. The idea is this. At Cesar, I mean, it's funny because we wanted to illustrate that. At Cesar, at 5 o'clock, 7 o'clock, 8:30, there's a group of people always the same. So 5 o'clock, we have 2 car mechanics. We have a plumber, remember? We have this federal judge that is retired. We have another federal judge. We have a guy that is in TV. We have the guy who does Cisco network. And there's a scientist. There's a couple of scientists, 2 geneticians. So it's completely.
And they all come in to see one another. I
mean, all of them,
very tight-knit group.
Always at 5 o'clock, all of them the same time. And they all talk to each other. They have completely different backgrounds, right?
I mean, mind you, one of those mechanics is a former lawyer who hated being a lawyer and ended up got his own garage and sending kids back to school.
Good to see you, man.
Yeah, just send your kids to Cesar. Why send them to school?
Remember, Chef, when people were asking us, are you an alcoholic? I used to say, no, we're not alcoholic. Alcoholics go to meetings. We're just drunks.
Right.
No. So is Flow still, what's happening with Flow? Because if most of the restaurants are closed, obviously.
Oh, we got really lucky. So I got a shit ton of PPP money for the project.
Oh, good.
Oh, great.
And so what we decided to do was, because then it was like, well, how do you structure it? How do you make this work so that it makes sense, so that it's of service? And what I figured out was that I could put 60 restaurants on the platform for 60 days based off the amount of money that I was given. And I can do that with no strings attached, just to help people get open and stay open. So
wow,
we're in the process. Well, I mean, it's not my money, and I've got to spend it. Otherwise, they're going to make me pay it back.
Right.
And so how do you use it to service the people that you love?
That's great.
To take care of the people that need it most. And again, call volume's up, I think 84% now, according to Yelp, because people are afraid. They have questions that they need answered before they come to your restaurant.
Right.
And so I saw this as an opportunity to help. And there have never been any contracts or hardware or software. It's always been this kind of invisible, benign system. But we're in the process of onboarding 60 restaurants. So of the 60 spots, we have 28 filled. So if there's anybody listening that wants to get on, you can get on. You can do it for the 60 days and then leave.
Wow.
Amazing, huh?
Oh, Joshua
Josh.
froze. He's frozen.
Josh is frozen. It must be really cold where he is.
Yeah. He's really good at doing that statue thing.
Josh Master, we're waiting for you to reconnect. I think you're gone.
Well,
There you go.
There, you're back. You're really good at the statue game.
I didn't blink once.
Oh,
So that must require a really special person to man the phone for that business, right? I mean,
oh yeah, for sure. You don't hire for skill, you hire for disposition.
Right, right. And they have to have all this information at their fingertips, right? So that they can be your restaurant instead of the other restaurant without them knowing.
So that's the beauty of the software. There's a 75 question questionnaire that they fill out that gives them all of the information they need to know to be able to book you out. And so the way the software works is, and because you don't have a pool of reservationists, you just have one. They get to know you. Like they're an extension of your team. So they've got this breakdown, this profile of your restaurant pulled up as soon as the phone rings for your restaurant. But after a week or two, they don't need it because they know you. They know everything about you, and they know how to navigate those questions.
Are you seeing? I mean, you must know a bunch of people in LA, right?
I do.
Do you see any reopening? I mean, I see a little bit of reopening, but people are complaining that they make less money. It's almost worthless to open as you are spending more money to open. And so what's going on in LA? I mean, I know here it's terrible.
It varies. So it looks like there's a full shutdown of downtown LA, meaning that anyone with a leasehold is leaving. You've seen, which is interesting because downtown held some of the highest, some of the greatest, highest lauded restaurants in the city. Right. So it'll be interesting to see who stays and who goes. Everybody's being more strategic. And so most places haven't opened. It's because they're asking big questions. Here's a big question for you. If I made I'll use myself as an example. If I made $3.4 million last year at a 6,000 square feet with this new business model where it's like bodega style shopping, delivery and takeout, can I make $3.4 million out of 3,000 square feet and drop my rent by half, maybe more than half?
And drop your labor?
Do I need to operate in the same way I did before? Is there a new business model that works? Mm-hmm. And so, I think that's kind of where everyone is. Yeah. It's the problem with the economy and the hospitality economy as it stands now is you can't live in this denial anymore because you just burn through cash so quickly. Yeah. So you can't say, oh, well, our numbers are back to almost what they were before, but I'm doing all delivery and takeout. Because third-party platforms are now taking 15 to 20% of your money, which didn't matter when that was 10% of your revenue. But now that it's 80% of your revenue, you can't pay your rent and you're about to go out of business. Right, right. What I talk about a lot on the show and what I'm most interested in is the definition of team and expanding that definition to saying my vendors need to be constantly working on getting me better terms and better pricing, right? Even if that costs them revenue. My landlord needs to stop charging me a flat rate and they need to take a small base rate plus a percentage of my net sales. Right. Like I'm unwilling to invest in any other business that isn't willing to invest in me at this point because I believe that a rising tide raises all ships. And I believe that, like using myself as an example, I offered my landlord a deal where he would get a small base rate plus a percentage of my net sales. And if I hit my old sales, he'll actually make more than he was making before.
Right.
That's great. That's great. Right.
But we'll see if he takes it or not.
You have not. Okay, so you have this. Okay. This is an offer.
This is an offer that is on the table. This is not an offer that has been taken.
Is this an offer that you made him since you closed, or was it before you closed? Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, I'm all about transparency. My rent's $22,000 a month.
Yeah.
That's a lot. That's a lot.
That's a lot, but it doesn't surprise me given where
how
you
big
are.
is that place?
6,000 square feet, 2 stories.
Okay.
Oh, 2 stories. Wow.
So
speaking of your restaurant,
sorry.
Sorry. Go ahead.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
My place in Paris, I had a Tex-Mex restaurant in Paris, 6,000 square foot, 3 floors. It was pretty insane. So
it's a monster. It's a monster.
The headache. I can see the headache of the staffing. At some point, I had 47 employees, and in France, it's very difficult. So
didn't you have a bar on each floor too?
Right.
You had a full bar on each.
We did as well.
5 o'clock in the morning. Closed at 5 o'clock in the morning. It was insane.
Oh God, not that.
So anyway, sorry to cut you, James. No, it was.
Well, I was going to just ask you where the name of your restaurant, Pro and Proper, celebrates the food, the Cajun and Creole traditions of Louisiana, which is where you're from. What does the name mean? Where does that come from?
So I wanted to capture an entire market out of ego, selfishness, and greed. So I wanted it to be your favorite restaurant and your favorite bar. So what we did was we created 2 different aesthetics, 2 different menus. On the first floor, you had Prue, which means courageous and valiant. It was meant to exemplify, these Southern values and these Southern ideals of bravely going into new uncharted territory. When we opened Prue, there was nothing else. It was just us. There was no coffee shop across the street or hotel next door, or trendy shoe store half a block away. There was just us in the middle of this desolate area. Proper represented the dining hall, a proper dining hall. We wanted you to have a proper Southern dining experience. And so that was the dichotomy between the two, hoping that we could get you, let's say, once a month, twice a month for dinner, but every night in the bar room.
And the bar has its own food menu as well?
It does. Oh, yeah. We rock 2 food menus.
And so is there a kitchen on each level too? Or
no, we ran the food.
I see. Wow. Sounds wonderful. Yeah. I can't wait to come down.
I can't wait to reopen.
When are you? So are you optimistic about reopening?
Well, wait. We have a question here from this guy and our friend Kenneth, and actually it's very relevant. No, don't open a place now.
Yeah.
I mean,
most of us don't make a lot of money when things are okay. So.
Yeah. No. Yeah. Exactly. So, without to go too much into detail, Kenneth, I would wait. Really, I would wait like a year or 2, maybe.
I'm waiting. I just want to see a path forward. Like, guys, my plan is super simple. And when I tell it to people, it resonates. You find me someone that's making a shit ton of money, I'll do that. Whatever he's doing, I'll do. But like until I see that, until I see
some people are making money.
Are they making real money though? Like real
money?
No,
but I mean, there's a few people that are doing it. They do a lot of delivery. They have a good crème, but it's a very few of them, and most of them don't. So the majority does not make money. The large majority.
It's just not a risk I'm willing to take. You know,
also,
I think you got one shot to reopen.
Also, if you're making good money, but you're working 16 hours a day, and you never see your wife and child, then are you really making good money, or are you just, you've got to take your lifestyle into account. I mean, you want to be able to spend time with your family. You need downtime. You need time away from the restaurant. So if you can't make the good money in a normal work situation, then it's not really worth it.
Well, but it's look at Microsoft, just as a great example. They have 6 years worth of cash on hand, right? So if they don't bring in another dollar, for the next 6 years, they're good. And then you look at the dynamics and the dichotomy of our industry. I would argue that I haven't reopened because I'm not ready, because I haven't figured out pricing and gratuity and hours of operation and all of these different elements that'll guarantee me, not hopefully, it'll guarantee me profitability. But I would also argue the point that none of us are there yet. And
Right.
that the only way we're going to get there is collectively through a conversation and through consensus. What is going to kill my business is if I make poor decisions, but what could also kill my business is if my neighbor does. I already see it. I've had it sitting on my desk. I'm going to pull it out now. This restaurant, this sushi restaurant, just sent me a mailer. They're offering 20% off online special takeout orders, 30% off their daily happy hour special, 20% off an entire dinner purchase, and 10% off lunch. Right?
So they're not making any money.
No, and they're screwing the people that are trying to.
Yeah.
And that's my whole point is like, when are we going to get out of the race to sell the cheapest shit for the longest period of time?
Right.
When does that change?
So
my vote is now.
Hey,
Yeah,
Josh,
I agree.
do you remember Groupon when they first came?
Oh,
Groupon?
yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I knew someone actually who got so many sales on Groupon, and I told him, and he has a little restaurant, a really cute little restaurant, and he was kind of making it and I said, don't do that, you're gonna tank that. He took so much cash from those Groupon. After a few weeks, there was no new money coming, right? Because he had to sell it. He tanked,
Right.
He had to close because he sold so many discounted meals that it would make no sense. And I said, I can't discount. My price I have really carefully crafted my prices so I can pay my staff, my rent, and we keep a little bit so we can go to the next month and on. So there's no way I'm going to discount. For what? What does that mean, discount? That's
Right.
the price I have thought about. This is like a whole thing of them. So anyway,
Well, let's
Why
face
can't the
it.
price be the price?
Yeah. Most Americans don't have 3 months worth of expenses in the bank, let alone most business owners. So it's not surprising.
Right, but I don't know if any of this is as big of a deal as we've made it out to be in our own mind. An apples to apple comparison is fuel, right? You go to the gas station. The price is different day to day. The price is different day to day based on variable expenses. Our expenses are variable as well, based off the ever increasing labor due to the ever increasing minimum wage, and due to what's the most you've ever paid for a box of limes? And what's the least you've ever paid for a case of limes? It's bananas.
Yeah.
It's bananas. The difference is almost $100 between the cheapest case of limes I ever bought and the most expensive case of limes I ever bought. And so, like, why can't we be more responsible with pricing?
Uh-huh.
What is this compulsion? And I'm guilty of it too. What's this compulsion with being busy all of the time? Isn't it more important to be profitable all of the time?
well, no, this is a concept that only when you understand the business you can understand, Josh. A lot of people, they go into business because they think it's cool, and that's a whole mindset, right? I mean, you can't just you have to understand that all the money that comes in is not yours.
Right.
It's like you have to. This is all for paying stuff. But a lot of people, they go into business, they have no clue. I mean, you look at what I think I was looking at a number of mom and pop restaurants, and the good thing is about 75% of the restaurant in America, which is good. It's good. I mean, a lot of people are just that. But I know a lot of people personally say, "Oh, I'm going to do that. It's going to be cool." No, it's not going to be cool.
Right.
It is not going to be cool. This is like
find me another industry where your parents can die, you can inherit a shit ton of money, and then just enter an industry.
Right? No.
It's like people inherit money and then they open a restaurant.
We're almost at the end of the show. Josh, I know you have a show also. You have a podcast, right? Is that a full podcast?
Full Comp.
It is. Yes, sir. It's called Full Comp. And most of the questions that we're trying to answer on this show are questions that we tackle there. The idea is to pull as many great ideas from as many resources as possible.
Joshua, I think we'd be very remiss if we did not mention that I believe it's Voyage LA magazine named you, I don't know if I have this right, but steamiest guy in LA. Didn't you get that award?
No. My God.
I found that. I found that
thank
in
you.
my research.
Thank you, James. Yes, we would be remiss if we did not bring that up as well. Thank you. Much appreciated.
Okay.
Well, you
so
certainly
that-
have movie star looks, so you're right at home in
Oh.
LA. So
Flattery will get you everywhere with me, James.
thank you so much
All
for
right.
being on the show today.
Thank you, Josh. Beautiful. Thank you so much.
Oh,
man.
it was my pleasure. I had the time of my life. It was so
I
nice
feel
chatting
like
with
we
you
could
guys.
talk for another hour on this subject, but
Absolutely.
maybe you'll come back and
I would
we'll
love to.
look at your podcast too. Listen to your podcast.
I would love that, guys. Thank you so much.
All right,
Thank you, man.
you.
All
Thanks
right, see
everyone.
you.
Be safe out there. Join us
Thank
next
you,
week
Kenneth, thank you. We'll answer that question again also.
when we get around to it, Kevin. Kenneth.